Utah is set to take on Arizona. It's the two programs' first ever matchup while both being in the Big 12 rather than the Pac 12. How will the Wildcats fare in their trip to Salt Lake City? That's what we're discussing on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we cover your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. You can visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by college football analyst for PFF, Max Chadwick. And Max, we're going to preview this matchup between Utah and Arizona on both sides of the ball. And at the end, I have a interesting take on about Utah's chances of going undefeated this season. I want to get your reaction on. But as someone who covers the college football landscape, I thought we could look at where both these teams are 4 games into the season. So I think for Utah, right, just had your best road win since 2018 with a gutsy performance and a win that in many ways epitomizes like what Kyle Whittingham is about, right? Like just toughness, finding a way. The defense was outstanding. The offense each week has done positive things while still maybe leaving a little bit to be desired, but still, like, you had a backup quarterback in. That was your toughest game on the schedule on the season, and you get it done. So I feel incredibly good about where this Utah team is at right now, and I think they are still the best team in the Big 12, but especially after the week some of the other top teams had.
Yeah, honestly, and it was a heck of a win. Like I said, it was a Kyle Whittingham win, right? It was a game that, you know, when we previewed it on the PFF College Football Show, I was saying, hey, my prediction for this game hinges on Cam Rising. If he's not 100% or if he's out, I'm not picking Utah to win this game. If he is 100%, then I do think Utah's going to win this game. And he was out, and I immediately thought, okay, Oklahoma State's going to win this game because it's in Stillwater. You got a true freshman quarterback, and Isaac Wilson's playing back there. And Wilson wasn't great, but Utah's defense was spectacular, and Micah Bernard was a really, really good player in that game as well. Obviously, 186 rushing yards was pretty much the entire offense for Utah in that game. So, yeah, I was really, really impressed by that performance, and it just goes to show why Kyle Whittingham and his staff is one of the best coaching staffs in college football.
I totally agree. Really impressed with what this Utah team did. Dorian Singer, Brant Keith, the other guys who stepped up. And I know for your guys' show, for you guys talked about the highest graded players that Utah has. You mentioned both Gilman and Junior Tafuna, who I thought were absolutely fantastic as Oklahoma State. We know about Ollie Gordon and what he can do. Tafuna made sure there were no rushing lanes available. And then Gilman and the rest of the secondary just making sure nothing was getting by through the air. So let's turn over and learn a little bit about this Arizona team. It's been an interesting season so far for the Wildcats. You know, they were tied with, or they were only up by 3 against New Mexico in their first game of the season. They were trailing against Northern Arizona, shout out Big Sky, in their second game, and they scored their first drive of the Kansas State game. That was at Kansas State, but still got blown out 31-7. Max, I know you were high on this Wildcats team. I was really high on Noah Fifita, Tetairoa, McMillan. McMillan especially has obviously still looked the part of one of the best receivers, if not the best in college football. But why haven't things gone the way we all kind of thought they would for the Wildcats to start 24?
Yeah, JT, I don't know if there's a single school that relies more on their star players than Arizona. They are really, really led by their superstars, right? Noah Fifita, their quarterback, Tetairoa McMillan, their wide receiver. Jonas Vainea is a really good right tackle. He could be a first-round pick. Jakario Davis has kind of had a really slow start to his season, but I think at his best, he's a top 5 corner in the country. But that's really it, right? Outside of those guys, there really hasn't been too much to write home about for Arizona. And I think that Arizona has become very predictable offensively, and that it's going to go to number 4 if it's a passing play. Like, he's legitimately like their only weapon out there, seems like, on passing plays. So, yeah, it's been very predictable, I think. And I think that's the biggest problem with Arizona right now is that, yeah, it's great that you have Tetairoa McMillan, who could be a top 5 pick in the draft, and Noah Fifita is one of the best quarterbacks in America, but you got to find something else, right? Like last year they had Jacob Cowing, who, you know, as the weeks go on, Jacob Cowing looks like a very, very valuable player because of just having another guy that can get open and get yards for you. They don't really have that right now in Arizona. So that's the big issue with this offense right now. The defense, the run defense has not been great, especially against mobile quarterbacks like Devin Dampier from New Mexico State and Avery Johnson from Kansas State that really killed them in those 2 games in the run defense side of it. So, yeah, it hasn't been a great start to Arizona. I still think they can turn around. I'm not completely writing them off either, but it just, at least from what I expected entering the year, they are a lot more reliant on those superstars than pretty much any other team in the country right now.
For Utah, there's been pleasant surprises, right? When we've seen the players in the defensive backfield, we thought would be good, but it's like, oh, hey, they're really good. The offensive line has some of the highest graded players. Pro Football Focus, you guys have really liked what Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu. They're the 2 tackles at Utah have been producing. So lots of pleasant surprises for Utah and lots of disappointments for Arizona more so. What have been some of the biggest disappointments for you on this roster, and what position groups are you keenly looking at that have to have a big bounce back performance off the bye week if they hope to compete against Utah?
Yeah, I think it starts off with the run defense. I think, especially in this game, if Isaac Wilson is once again the starting quarterback, then I think that you really need to key in on Micah Bernard. And I think the one thing that I like for Arizona in this game is that, yes, Isaac Wilson is mobile, and yes, he's a threat to run, and yes, Cam Rising is as well if he's the starting quarterback, but they're not like Avery Johnson and Devin Dampierre. And I think that if if Arizona straight up just has to account for Micah Bernard and really nobody else, that's easier for them as a run defense than say, we got to watch out for Devin Dampierre, we got to watch out for Avery Johnson and the running backs as well. So I think if it's just straight up handoffs, like Micah Bernard was getting a lot in that game, then I think it's a little bit easier. Obviously, it's easier said than done because Micah Bernard was still fantastic this past weekend. Yeah. But it's a little bit easier for Arizona's run D to defend. Now, I will say on straight handoffs, Arizona's run D has still been pretty bad, but they haven't really been facing too much of that lately. So I'm curious to see what that looks like in this game. And then obviously I went over already with the offensive side of the ball. They got to find someone else besides Tetairoa McMillan. I think he's a great receiver. He might be the best receiver in college football right now. But you cannot have one receiver be your entire passing game. You need to find something else outside of him, or else you could just double him, and all of a sudden your passing game, is completely terrible, honestly. So, I think that they got to find someone else outside Tetairoa McMillan. Obviously, you don't need to find a star, but just someone that can just, you keep the defense accountable a little bit. They got to do that as well. So the run defense for Arizona has got to be a lot better, and they got to find somebody else in that passing game to throw to outside of number 4.
Mm-hmm. Avery Johnson is a better running quarterback than either Cam Rising or Isaac Wilson will be, but both Isaac grew as a scrambler a lot last week. He had that big run down the sideline against Oklahoma State, and we know Cam, if he does end up playing, is crafty and can make things happen for this Utah team. We're going to talk about a matchup, offense versus defense, both sides of the ball in a moment. But Max, I do just want to ask you something because you cover college football nationally, as we said, because you mentioned Cam Rising. So I'm just thinking about still how wild the whole Cam Rising situation is, right? Like last year, thought he was going to play, and week after week, they kind of said like, oh, we're waiting and seeing, and doesn't play at all. This year, even this last week, right? We thought he was going to play. Dorian Singer said he was going to play and then doesn't end up playing. And he has now he has the hand injury, which is still such like a seriously like get shoved into the gator. It's just such bad luck that's gone Cam's way. This whole weird quarterback thing with Cam Rising, can you compare it to anything that you've ever covered with another college football program?
No, I can't. And I said it on the show, on our Sunday morning show. I said, there is not a better coach. I think out of all the coaches in college football, Kyle Whittingham probably is the best poker player because he has fooled us time and time again. And credit to him. I actually interviewed Kyle Whittingham last year right before the Florida game, like literally the week of the Florida game. And one of my first questions to him was like, all right, coach, what's the status of Cam Rising? Is he going to play or not? And he told me straight up, he's like, listen, Max, he's 50-50 for Florida. And obviously he didn't play. And then I was like, okay, well, 50-50, obviously coin flip can go the other way as well. And he didn't play that game. But it stands to reason if he's 50-50 for the first game of the season, he's going to play the rest of the year. He didn't play the rest of the season. So that was surprising. And then again, this week I got fooled again by Dorian Singer and by everyone else in Utah's program saying, oh no, Cam is going to be ready. Don't worry about it. He's going to be fine. And 20 minutes before kick, he's warming up pregame. We're like, okay, he's going to play. 20 minutes before kickoff, he's not playing. So that again, I hate it as a media personality because it sucks for me trying to predict these games, not knowing who the heck the quarterback is, and I'm sure the fans hate it as well, not knowing who the quarterback is. But honestly, it helps Utah because now if they don't know who the quarterback is, then the opposing team doesn't know who the quarterback is, and they have to prepare for all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, like I said before, Kyle Whittingham is frustrating as a media personality. I'm sure it's frustrating as a fan as well. But it's just, I think it's really, really funny how he's kind of fooled us time and time again with Cam Rising stats. I don't know if he's actually intentionally trying to do that, but I just think it's pretty funny how it's going this way. But yeah, like I said, it's frustrating for us, but also it's probably helping out Utah, honestly, in terms of the opposing game plan. So yeah, it's been really funny, honestly, keeping track of this stuff, even from last year going to this year now.
I had Moose Bingham on my show earlier this week. He's a former Utah kicker who does some recruiting stuff now out in Salt Lake City. He said Kyle Whittingham is the most competitive person he's ever been around. So that slight competitive advantage he could get by disguising his quarterbacks, he's going to exploit. And Kyle, like you said too, I love Kyle. He could be very funny though too, because we was asked by one of the media members after the game, like, "Oh, what happened with Cam? We heard he was going to play." And he's like, "What do you mean you heard he was playing? I didn't say anything about that." Like that's like not you, Kyle, but one of your receivers earlier in the week said something about that. But I can't understand it. You're right; it is frustrating, but it's what's best for Utah. And Utah has a big matchup this week with Arizona. They're riding high off the Oklahoma State win. Let's dive a little bit deeper and break down this matchup on both sides of the ball. We're going to be doing that in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest seats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And the NFL season is really starting to heat up now. We got 3 weeks of action in. We're starting to figure out who the pretenders are, the contenders. We saw what Jaden Daniels was just able to do for the Commanders. How about the Bengals? Are they going to be able to get back on track? There's so much NFL action. How about college football, right? Utah still a favored over 10 points at 12.5 the last I checked against Arizona. How are you feeling about that one? And the MLB playoffs are here. So everything's going on at FanDuel. You can get started with that $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Make sure you head over to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook today. All right, Max, let's start diving into this matchup a little bit deeper. So looking at the first, I want to start with Arizona's offense against Utah's defense. When you look at Arizona, they scored on their first drive against Kansas State and then never scored again, which is pretty crazy when you fathom that. You know, they had over 300 total yards as well, too. So they had moved the ball, but interception in the end zone by Fifita. The running game did not get going, less than 60 yards rushing. So as I look at this matchup, you didn't run the ball well against Kansas State, who has a good front seven. I do think Utah, before the season, was returning almost everyone from a top 5 run defense from a season ago. They just held the nation's best running back last year's nation's best running back. We're going to see with Oklahoma State with Ollie Gordon if he can't eventually get going. And the offensive line there has a lot of issues. But I do not expect Arizona to have success running the ball. So then it's going to fall once again on Fifita and McMillan. I think Utah is going to be able to get pressure like Kansas State was often able to do. For Utah, then you double McMillan. I think the Wildcats could be trouble, in their offense could face a lot of trouble in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, I'm with that. I think they got to find balance, and whether that comes with another receiver emerging or that comes just in the running game being better, they got to find some sort of balance. Because, like you said, it's way too predictable right now with McMillan and Fifita, and they're both stars. Don't get me wrong; they're both absolute superstars and both among the best in the country at their positions. But it can't just be those two players offensively. So they got to find something else. I think that they got to find another receiver. They got to find the run game more. So. I will say in that Kansas State game, they were behind early in that game, so they kind of abandoned the run game. I think if they can kind of stay in this game and keep Utah honest by having a run game and pass game with Quali Conley and stuff like that, that could be an avenue for Arizona to have a chance. But they cannot just go out there and think, oh, Fifita, McMillan will save us in this game, because Kyle Whittingham and everyone else, Morgan Scalley, they're way too good of coaches to let McMillan beat them single-handedly. So they won't let that happen. I'm assuming their game plan this week is going to be, hey, if we lose to Arizona and Tetairoa McMillan doesn't have a great game, we should be fine with that, right? It's when you lose to them and that guy has a big game, then you should be kicking yourself as a coach, saying, hey, we knew the game plan is just stop number 4, and then they see what they do after that. So I think I'm assuming their game plan this week is going to be take away Tetairoa McMillan, and then if Noah Fifita and the other weapons still beat them, then fine, you live with that. But you cannot, if you're a Utah coach, you cannot live with Tetairoa McMillan being the reason why you lost that game.
Agreed. And Utah has some good corners, right? We've seen Zamiah Vaughn's had a pretty good start. Smith Snowden's done some nice things. Elijah Davis, and they've been beaten time to time too. But often they have these miraculous interceptions. And look at the Oklahoma State game. Sure, late it got away from them, but when that game was close, it was 22-3 before Oklahoma State's offense was finally able to really produce anything. So I like this secondary, and Morgan Scalley excels at taking away what you do best. So like you mentioned, they took away Ollie Gordon last week. I expect them to take away McMillan, and they're going to make life hard on Fifita. And you know what else makes life hard on Fifita is this is Rice-Eccles Stadium. This is a place that only Bo Nix and Oregon have gone into and won since the post-COVID era. So that's where it's just very hard to win at Utah. It's going to be loud, and we see often these teams get worn down by the altitude. So I think Arizona's offense could be in for a rough one as well. And Max, I don't know if you know this. I've talked about this with the fans a little bit, but last year Arizona, when they took Utah on, they scored with 40 seconds left in the game. They ran 4 verts and they threw it up, and they could easily just ran the ball and ran out the clock. And Utah was not happy about it. So I do not worry about Utah taking this Arizona team lightly, even though the Wildcats getting a bye and having the opportunity to try and tweak a couple things does make this one a bit more interesting for me in that regard. But want to shift over to the other side of the ball. So you got Kansas State ran for over 230 yards. We're talking about Utah's offense versus Arizona's defense. And I do expect Utah to have a lot of success running the ball. Kyle Whittingham was asked, hey, why did Kansas State have so much success against Arizona? He could barely hide the massive smile on his face when he was talking about running the ball, because that's what Kyle Whittingham wants to do. He wants to run the ball, play strong defense, kill time, keep offense off the field. And he knows how good McMillan and Fifita are. They're going to have a good game plan for them, but the best way to also just limit their production is to keep them off the field. You talked about what New Mexico State's quarterback Dampier was able to do. He had over 200 yards in week 1. And look, Arizona's pass rush hasn't really gotten going yet. So I think this defense, even though I think they have some nice players in the secondary, Dorian Singer is going to be ready to go for this one. I don't think things ended badly when he left Arizona, but anytime you play your former team, you always want to show up and do some big things. So I think Isaac Wilson will have time to throw. And I do think that because Utah will be a balanced rushing attack, I expect Micah Bernard to go over 200 yards once again in this one, based on what we've seen from the Wildcats defense so far. I'm expecting a big day out of Utah offensively too.
Yeah, I think Micah Bernard's the key. I think, again, Isaac Wilson, it was his first career start, so I'm still holding out, and he's still got a long career ahead of him, but he wasn't great in his first career start.
Yeah, he started at Utah State as well. So
right. Yeah, you're right. So 35.8 grade this past weekend. So it wasn't great, but yeah, no big time throws, 2 turnover plays. I mean, he wasn't the reason why they won this game.
No, for sure not. I agree with that.
Yeah, it was because of Micah Bernard and that defense obviously being stellar. But Micah Bernard needs to be the key once again offensively. Even if Rising is back this week, I don't think he'll be 100%. And if he's not, then you're going to need that Micah Bernard to once again be a star. So again, Arizona's run D has been really disappointing so far. But the one saving grace for this game, like I said before, is that there are 2 games where they really struggled in run defense. It was against New Mexico and against Kansas State. And like I said, there are 2 quarterbacks in that game, Devin Dampier and Avery Johnson. They're 2 of the 15 leading rushers in the country at quarterback, right? So Utah, again, Isaac Wilson can run. Cam Rising, like I said, is a little crafty. He's not the dual threat that he used to be before his injuries, but they're not like that. So I think that's kind of a good thing for Arizona, is that, hey, it's not like an option run game where you have to account for the quarterback on every single run play. Like, Utah is just going to stand up straight up and just try to run the ball, hand the ball off, and nothing too crazy in terms of the run concepts with them. So I think that's, for Arizona, it's less trickery, honestly, and it's easier to just digest it. Doesn't mean it's easier to stop. You still have to out physical Utah and beat them that way. And I don't know if they are capable of doing that, but at least for their linebackers, who really struggled in those 2 games because of just how hard it is to defend the quarterback run like that. It's a little bit easier for them to diagnose what's going on in the run game in this week, I think. So that I think is a little bit of an advantage for Arizona, but we'll see if they can even out physical Utah and stop this run game, though.
That's what'll be tough for the Wildcats based on what we've seen. And you're right, Isaac Wilson did not play great last weekend, but I do think for a true freshman finding his footing, I was really pleased with how he played on the road at Oklahoma State. How optimistic are you about this Utah team if Wilson does have to be the starter for, maybe even past the game that awaits them this Saturday in Arizona?
I think they need Rising back pretty quickly. I don't I'm
Okay.
pretty uncomfortable with Isaac Wilson right now as a starting quarterback. I think he's definitely got a future, and I think he definitely is a guy that I'm excited about for the future. But I just have not been impressed by what I've seen from him so far. Now, that granted, it has been a tough ask for him. Like they weren't expecting Isaac Wilson to come out here this early on into his career, so I'm giving him that. But like I said, he hasn't really come out and looked great either, right? So they're kind of winning in spite of Isaac Wilson, in my opinion, right now. So they definitely need Cam Rising back as soon as possible in order to just, be a dominant team like that. But I think there's something there with him. Obviously, he's a top 20 quarterback coming out of high school, and he's going to be the quarterback of the future, most likely. But I just don't think that the future is right now, honestly. And they're kind of, like I said, they're winning. They are winning, which is good, but they're not winning because of him by any means. And I think they need Cam Rising back in order to get that passing game to kind of balance out the run game a little bit.
I think in spite of him is strong, but I agree. He's not the reason that they've been winning. I think he's been doing positive things for them, grown a little bit each week. But I agree with you here, the game were to fall on his shoulders, I would be nervous because it is such a big spot for a freshman. But the other truth of the reality of the situation for Utah is this schedule does not present too many daunting challenges the rest of the way. Strong teams for sure, but not too many daunting challenges. I have a bold take about what I think this Utah team has a chance to do that I want to close out today's show. I'm going to be revealing that to Max to get his reaction in one moment. But first, want to take an opportunity to tell you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes. It's our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. With Prize Picks, there are so many fantastic features you can get into. How about like Caleb Williams passing yards gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free dubs. Don't miss the deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get on the action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. How about you can play alongside celebrities? Drewski, Joe Budden, MMA champion Sugar Sean O'Malley. You can now find community players under the promo tabs on the app and view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Download the Prize Picks apps today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege and get $50 instantly. That's all caps, no spaces. LOCKEDONCollege and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONCollege and Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play the $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game today with Prize Picks. All right, Max, close this one out. I have a fun take. Earlier this week, I talked about that I think 12-0 is on an undefeated regular season is on the table for Utah. I understand why Utah fans were like, whoa, slow your roll. I'm not saying Utah's going to go undefeated. I do not genuinely think that they will go undefeated because I just think that is such a tough task to accomplish in college football. But of all the teams in the country, I do think that Utah is one of the 5 most likely Power 4 teams to go undefeated. Let me give you my reasoning why. So let's first look at the teams that I think are the most likely to go undefeated. Right now, I actually think it's Texas because they get Georgia at home. And outside of that, their schedule doesn't scare me too much. I also think Ohio State has a chance, even though at Oregon and Penn State, I still figure to be tough. Then Miami. That Miami might be the one that has even easier path than Utah. Maybe even they just have Louisville, and that still could be a tough game. But I just really like the Canes this season. Then I actually think it's Utah. Some of you may be listening and go, whoa, where are the other SEC teams? Well, let's start with Georgia. They have to play Alabama, Texas, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. And of course, that means Tennessee, Missouri, all those SEC teams, they're going to be beating up on each other. As of this moment, Utah has 0 games remaining against a top 15 team. We'll see if BYU is still ranked when Utah faces them off. We'll see if Iowa State is still ranked by the time they reach that point. Utah, coming into the season, we knew they had one of the easiest schedules in college football. They just passed their toughest test. I do not think this team will go undefeated. I think they will slip up, but I absolutely think they have a chance, and I do believe they're one of the most 5 likely teams remaining to go undefeated, Max.
I don't hate it. I really don't, because you look at the 2 conferences where it's most likely, and I would agree with you. It's probably the Big 12 and the ACC. So I would say Miami is certainly probably number 1 on that list for me because they don't really play anyone. But other than that, I kind of like that. So I think Utah definitely has a shot. Obviously, they host Arizona, they host BYU, they host Iowa State. Really not a lot of truly hard road games for them. I mean, they're at Colorado and they're at UCF, which could be semi-interesting. But yeah, I think, like I said, they got rid of their toughest test already at Oklahoma State. They avoid Kansas State as well. I think I don't hate the take at all, honestly. And I can see it happening. I don't think this is going to happen. But I do think that if you're asking who the 5 most likely, I think, Utah honestly probably would be in that mix just because it's one of the best home environments in college football. You see it by their record and their splits on home and away. And then the fact that their hardest games remaining, Arizona, BYU, Iowa State, they're all at home, honestly. So you're going to start talking about games like Colorado and UCF as the maybe potential road losses for them. And then at that point, I don't even know if they'll lose those games either. So, yeah, I don't hate it at all. I think this is certainly a strong possibility they could do it.
That's where I would lean as well. Before the season, I picked Colorado to be Utah's one loss, honestly. And now I look at it, I'm like, the Buffs still I thought they'd be a little even better in the trenches. They've taken a step back. But the way to beat this Utah team I've seen in the past is you have to be able to make NFL throws. We know Shedeur Sanders is the one guy remaining on Utah's schedule who can clearly do that. So I still give that a chance to be their loss. And if I still had to say, I'd either go that one or the UCF one probably right now, just because being an undefeated team is such rare air. But Utah is one of the few teams in the country. I said Texas already. I think Miami would be in here too. And I do think Utah is in this frame as well, where every game left on their schedule, Max, I expect them to be favored. And Utah is really set up to make a run, not just to the Big 12 championship game, but then obviously you're setting yourself up to do things in the college football playoff. And Utah has to feel good about where they're at right now with the current state of the Big 12 and even some of the other teams like a Michigan taking a step back.
Yeah, definitely. And even like a team like Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame, if they lose another game the rest of the year, Notre Dame's out, right? And Notre Dame has a big one this weekend against Louisville. I don't think Notre Dame does not play in a conference championship game, obviously, so they can't even automatically qualify. And then their schedule isn't strong enough right now to get in. I mean, USC just lost to Michigan. Obviously, they play Louisville, who's a good team, like a top 20 team, and they got USC, who's still a top 15 team right now, but it's not as strong as it once looked. I mean, Florida State's completely fallen off, so you can't even count that as a big game anymore for Notre Dame. So, yeah, Notre Dame's kind of walking a tightrope right now, where if they lose another game this year, I don't think a 10-2 Notre Dame can get into the playoff, or at least I probably wouldn't put them into the playoff at 10-2, honestly. So, I think it's really interesting, and I think obviously the ACC kind of looks like Miami or bust right now. We'll see Clemson's looked a lot better these last couple of games, but it's going to be really interesting. I think Utah's got to be feeling really good about their chances right now to make the 12-team playoff.
They should be feeling good. Max, I'm feeling good because you were kind enough to take the 26 minutes to join me, my friend. Thank you so much for hopping on. If people want to learn more about everything that you guys are doing at PFF, where should they head over to?
Yeah, check it all out at pff.com. I host the PFF College Football Show, and we'll actually be previewing this Utah-Arizona game in about 3.5 hours. So we've got our preview show every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. It goes live on YouTube, so I'm really excited about that one. And and also I have a new Twitter now, because my old one got hacked because I'm an idiot. So my new Twitter is a complete opposite of this handle right here. It's at CFB Max Chadwick, no longer at Max Chadwick CFB. I was a fool and I clicked on a link that was saying they were investigating me for copyright. And they said, we're going to delete your account within 24 hours if you don't fill out this form. And I actually got investigated for copyright a couple of days earlier, like legitimately. So I was like, oh my God, am I actually getting screwed here? I clicked on the form and then immediately my Twitter was hacked. So don't click those links if you get the DM in your inbox. I have a new Twitter now at CFB Max Chadwick.
Make sure you guys go follow him at his new X account. And hey, we give you everything on Locked On Utes. We'll give you game previews and we give you advice on what not to click on X as well. Max, thank you again for joining me.
Thanks, man.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. Make sure you guys check out everything Max is going on at PFF. You're in the market for a second listen. Locked On College Football, Locked On Big 12 have you covered as well. That is going to do it for our show. We'll be back tomorrow predicting which Utah players are in for a big game against Arizona. We look forward to seeing you then.